Hey guys, tonight we're going to talk about more differences and more compromises. That gets us into the Federalists and Anti-Federalists as well as the Bill. Next quiz will be on Monday. The topics covered will be 1.6 through 1.8. That's the constitutional compromises, things like the Virginia Plan, New Jersey Plan, and the like. The Federalists and Anti-Federalists, and the Bill of Rights, which we will cover tonight. This is the last time I'm going to warn you to take notes. Hopefully you're getting the hang of this and you're feeling a whole lot more comfortable and confident taking notes. This will be the last time that I warn you that it is necessary. So tonight what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the Federalists versus Anti-Federalists and the compromises that led to the ratification of the Constitution. So we're doing two objectives in one night, but they are relatively easy to understand and pretty condensed in nature. So our vocab for tonight are the Federalists, the Anti-Federalists, the Federalist Papers, Federalism, the Bill of Rights, and ratify. So you can see the federal part is definitely coming into play. Federalists versus Anti-Federalists. So the situation was when the Constitution was signed in September of 1787, this wasn't an easy decision made by anybody. It only took 9 legislatures of the states to be able to approve it, but to even get to that point, there were so many disagreements. So we're going to talk about those tonight. Some of the Federalists were people like James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and John Jay. 2 of those you probably have heard of. You might not have heard of John Jay. He comes into play a little bit later on when you get into U.S. history a little bit more. But these guys decided that in order to lead this fight to approve the Constitution, what they needed to do was to write essays where they would convince people that the Constitution was the way to go and that a strong national government was in fact not going to hurt the country but make it better. So of course they favored what we call federalism. Federalism is the shared powers between the federal and the state governments. So for the nature of this part right here, you actually don't need to copy down the chart or anything like that, because this comes into play a little bit later on in Unit 2, where you will know this chart by heart. But for tonight, I just wanted to kind of let you know what you're going to see a little bit later on. Anti-Federalist guys were people like George Mason, Patrick Henry, Richard Henry Lee, Thomas Jefferson, so some really big hitters, and these were the younger crowd, and basically they found problems with the Constitution the way that it was going to be written. They said that the strong government, a strong federal government is not necessary, and they were very scared of it, and they said there was not enough state sovereignty or state voice, and of course they said that there was no Bill of Rights added to the Constitution. So we are also going to talk about that tonight. Bill of Rights were adopted in 1789, so you can see that another compromise was made, another agreement was made to add the Bill of Rights. The Anti-Federalists were not giving this up. And these are the first 10 amendments or 10 changes to the U.S. Constitution. And of course, it was 2 years after the Constitution was signed. So the new government actually began in June of 1788. So it took a long time, or a little bit longer probably than anticipated, to get everybody on board, to get 9 of those states. So George Washington was elected the president, and eventually all 13 states joined in 1790. The Bill of Rights, again, are the first 10 amendments. The Anti-Federalists fought for these, and of course, the Anti-Federalist point of view was that the people had rights that were not listed in the Constitution. The Constitution gave government all of these rights and all of these powers, but it didn't really necessarily talk about the people, and so that's what the Anti-Federalists wanted to protect. So I know it looks like a lot as far as the key terms. If you feel like you understand them, you might not need to write them down. But if one of these pops up on a quiz and you haven't written them down, then again, that's on you. So, starting at the top, an amendment is a change to the Constitution. The grand jury actually determines if there's enough evidence to go to trial in a criminal case. Double jeopardy means that you cannot be tried twice for a same crime. Eminent domain says the government can take your private property for its use as long as they pay a fair price for it. Due process, we've already talked about a little bit. It's fair treatment in the court systems. Self-incrimination means that you do not have to testify against yourself. Bail is money that you pay to get out of jail while you await your trial. It doesn't mean that you can commit crimes and then pay your way out. Reserved powers are powers that belong to the states, and a search warrant is paperwork that allows the government to go in and search and to take property or people if necessary. So the First Amendment, guys, covers 5 different freedoms, and we remember it by RAPS: religion, assembly, press, petition, and speech. So there's actually 2 clauses that go with this religion. They're not things that you need to write down, but I do think that they are important. The first is the free exercise clause, which says that you have the right to be able to freely exercise any or no religion here in the United States. And it also has an establishment clause, which says basically the U.S. government is not going to establish a state or a national religion. Assembly is basically getting a group of people together. Press, of course, is written. Petition, getting people surrounding a common cause and writing their signature on some sort of petition sheet in order to get a change effected. And of course, speech. The Second Amendment is the right to bear arms. I know that John Green spoke about this one in quite a lot of detail already, so we will leave that up to different people's political beliefs. Amendment number 3 talks about quartering soldiers and the fact that you no longer would have to quarter soldiers. So if you think about the time period right before this, dealing with the Second and the Third and even the Fourth Amendment, there were soldiers living in people's houses. There were soldiers who were searching and seizing and taking things that they shouldn't have been. And these were British soldiers. And so they wanted to protect the colonists against these things. And of course, bringing in the Second Amendment to that would lead to the idea that they had just fought a revolution. And of course, the British were still in the colonies during this time period. They actually didn't leave for quite some time afterwards. And so definitely amendments being brought to bear because of the situations that they had just been through. Fourth Amendment says no unreasonable searches and seizures, and that a search warrant is required. And of course, we all know that a search warrant has to be signed by a judge. The Fifth Amendment has 5 parts to it, and I'll give you some easy ways to remember all of these amendments during class tomorrow, but I just want you to have the notes down. So, again, grand jury, no double jeopardy, eminent domain, due process of law, and you have the right to plead the Fifth, or no self-incrimination, in other words. Sixth Amendment says you have the right to a public and a speedy trial, that you have the right to hear and call witnesses for you, and you have the right to hear witnesses against you, and then of course you have the right to a lawyer. Seventh Amendment says that you get a jury trial in civil cases where the amount is more than $20. Yes, I said $20. So in case you want to lend somebody money, at least loan them a $20 bill and a penny so that you can take them to court just in case they don't pay you back, and you can get a jury trial for anything above $20. You might get left out of the courtroom, but you can have a jury trial. The Eighth Amendment has 2 parts: no excessive bail and no cruel and unusual punishment. The Ninth Amendment deals with people's rights that are not listed in the Constitution. So if you actually read the shirt, it's a little bit difficult to read, but it talks about the enumeration of the Constitution. And enumerated just means that they're basically numbered or listed in the Constitution. They said, okay, well, look, we know we're going to forget a few things here and there, so this covers pretty much anything else that's not listed in the Constitution. And we give those things to people. So these are examples here, right? The privacy and the right to an education. Last but not least, we have the 10th Amendment in the Bill of Rights. This is the last one, and these are known as states' rights or reserved powers. And it basically says that the powers not delegated or given to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. So these are things like driver's licenses and election laws, and we'll get into all these a little bit later on in Unit 2, but I always like to give you a little taste of what you're going to see later on.